There is a specific kind of silence that follows a rejection, not the silence of an empty room, but the silence of a phone screen that used to glow with someone's name and now shows nothing at all. Elias Rourke knew that silence well. 3 weeks ago, a man he had never met in person, a man whose laugh he had memorized through voice notes, whose late-night confessions had made him believe, for the first time in years, that he could be loved without conditions, had gone quiet. No explanation. No goodbye. Just a single message: "I can't do this. I'm sorry. Please don't message me again." Elias had told himself it didn't matter. Strangers on an app. Nothing real. Then, on a Monday morning in October, he walked into the offices of Marlowe Finch Design Studio for his first day at a new job, coffee in hand, nerves in his stomach, and found himself looking directly into the same brown eyes from the last photo that stranger had ever sent him. The man behind the desk marked Creative Director, Brand Team did not smile in recognition. He went pale. And Elias understood, in that instant, that the story he thought was over had only just begun. Elias had rehearsed his first day small talk in the elevator mirror. "Hi, I'm Elias, I just moved from the editorial team downtown, excited to be here." Simple. Professional. Forgettable, the way first day introductions were supposed to be. He did not rehearse for the moment his new manager, a woman named Priya with a clipboard and a fast walk, led him past a glass-walled office and said, "And this is Nathaniel Cross, our creative director, you'll be reporting into his team for the Halden campaign." The man rose from his chair the way people do when courtesy outweighs comfort. He was tall, dark-haired, dressed like someone who owned exactly one good blazer and wore it on days that mattered. And when his eyes met Elias's, something in his jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly, like a door being quietly shut. "Elias," Nathaniel said, and his voice was the same voice, steadier now, stripped of the late-night warmth Elias remembered, but unmistakably the same. "Welcome to the team." They shook hands. It lasted 2 seconds. It felt like an hour. Elias spent the rest of the morning at a desk with a view of the parking lot, learning the Wi-Fi password and the location of the good coffee machine, while a single sentence looped through his mind: "This cannot be happening." He'd known this man as N, 3 letters, a blurred profile photo, a voice that used to tell him about his mother's garden and his fear of turning out like his father. He had never once used a last name. He had never mentioned working at a design studio. And Elias had never, not for a second, imagined that the man who ended things without a real reason was someone he'd end up seeing every day under fluorescent office lights. At lunch, he sat alone at the far end of the break room, turning his coffee cup in slow circles, and told himself the only sensible thing to do was pretend none of it had happened. He almost believed himself, until Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, hesitated, and then crossed the room to sit down across from him anyway. "We should talk," Nathaniel said quietly. "Not here. Not now. But soon." Elias looked at him for a long moment. "You had 3 weeks to talk," he said. "You chose silence instead." Nathaniel's jaw worked like he wanted to argue, or explain, or apologize, and did none of those things. He simply nodded, once, and walked away. For the first 2 weeks, they built a careful architecture of professionalism around each other. Meetings were fine. Emails were fine. Nathaniel gave feedback on Elias's mock-ups with the same measured tone he used with everyone else, and Elias answered with the same polite nods he gave everyone else, and if anyone on the team noticed the tension crackling quietly beneath it, they said nothing. But Elias noticed things he wished he hadn't. The way Nathaniel absent-mindedly tapped his pen 3 times before speaking in meetings, a habit Elias remembered from a voice note about nervous energy before a big presentation. The way he took his coffee, black, no sugar, same as always. The small, specific details of a person don't disappear just because the context around them changes. And Nathaniel noticed things too. He noticed that Elias still bit the inside of his cheek when he was holding back an opinion he didn't think anyone wanted to hear. He noticed that Elias flinched, just slightly, whenever a deadline was announced with too much urgency, a habit Nathaniel now understood came from an old boss who used pressure as a weapon, a story Elias had shared at 2 in the morning, back when N was just a voice in the dark that made him feel safe enough to be honest. The knowing was its own kind of intimacy. It was also its own kind of torture. It was Priya, of all people, who unknowingly forced the first real conversation. She paired them for a client pitch, 2 weeks of after-hours work, just the two of them, refining a campaign for a client who wanted authenticity without knowing what that meant. The first working session was unbearable in its politeness. The second one cracked. "You keep doing that," Nathaniel said, halfway through revising a tagline, not looking up from his laptop. "Doing what?" "Agreeing with everything I say instead of telling me when I'm wrong." He finally looked up. "You didn't used to do that." Elias set down his pen. "You didn't used to disappear without an explanation." "People change, I guess." "I didn't disappear because I stopped caring." Nathaniel's voice had an edge of something raw in it now, something that had been held together too tightly for too long. "I disappeared because caring became impossible to survive." Elias felt his chest tighten. "That's not an answer. That's a headline for an answer you're still refusing to give me." Nathaniel looked away first. "Not tonight," he said. "I can't do this tonight." Elias gathered his things and left without another word, but for the first time since the silence began, he didn't feel dismissed. He felt like he'd finally cracked something open, and that whatever was underneath it might actually be worth the wait. Elias had kept the voice notes. He told himself it was an accident of never clearing his storage, not sentimentality, though he knew that was a lie he was only telling himself. That night, alone in his apartment, he played one he hadn't listened to in weeks. Nathaniel's voice, lower and looser than it ever sounded at the office, describing a childhood spent in a house where love came with conditions attached, good grades, the right kind of ambition, no room for anything that might embarrass a father who valued appearances over honesty. "I used to think if I just became successful enough," the recording said, "he wouldn't care about the rest. I don't think that's true anymore. I think some people will never stop needing you to be smaller than you are." Elias remembered how he'd responded that night, not with advice, because Nathaniel hadn't wanted advice, but with a simple, steady message: "You don't have to be smaller for me. Whatever the rest is, I already like all of you." He remembered how long it had taken N to respond. He remembered thinking, at the time, that the silence meant something good, the particular quiet of someone realizing they'd been understood. 3 days later, that same person had gone cold and vanished. Elias put his phone down, unable to finish listening, and sat with a question he wasn't ready to answer. Was he angrier that Nathaniel had left, or that some part of him still wanted to know why badly enough to keep listening? The Holden pitch meant late nights, and late nights meant the two of them, alone, long after the rest of the floor had emptied out. On a Thursday in November, with the deck finally finished and adrenaline still humming under his skin, Nathaniel suggested the roof. "There's a door on the 4th floor that's never locked," he said. "Best view in the building. I go up there when I need to think." Elias should have said no. He said yes instead. The city spread out beneath them in a haze of amber light, and for a while they just stood at the railing, not speaking, the cold air doing more to ease the tension between them than any conversation had managed in weeks. "My father found out," Nathaniel finally said, staring straight ahead. "The week we matched. He went through my laptop looking for something else and found messages between us instead. He told me if I kept," his voice kept behaving that way, "he'd stop paying my mother's medical bills. She has a heart condition. He controls the money. He knew exactly what leverage he had, and he used it." Elias turned to look at him fully now. "So you cut me off to protect her?" "I panicked," Nathaniel said. "I told myself if I disappeared completely, no explanation, no trace, you'd move on faster, and I could keep my head down long enough to get her care sorted through other means. It took me 3 weeks to set up a separate account to cover her costs myself. 3 weeks of being exactly the kind of coward my father always said I'd be if I chose myself over the family name. He finally met Elias's eyes. I told myself it was the responsible thing to do. It didn't feel responsible. It felt like carving out a piece of myself and mailing it to a stranger so my father could keep believing I didn't exist. Elias was quiet for a long moment, feeling something in his chest shift and resettle, anger and understanding refusing to fully separate from each other. You could have told me that, he said finally. Not everything. Just enough. I would have waited. I would have understood needing time. I know that now, Nathaniel said. I didn't trust it then. I'd never had someone choose to stay through something ugly. I assumed you'd leave the second things got complicated, so I left first, before you could. That's not protecting someone, Elias said quietly. That's deciding for them what they can handle. Nathaniel flinched like the words had landed exactly where they needed to. You're right, he said. I don't have a version of this where I come out looking good. I just have the truth, finally, which is more than I gave you before. The wind moved between them, and for the first time in weeks, the silence wasn't a wall. It was just two people, finally standing in the same honest quiet. Trust does not return in a single conversation, no matter how honest. Elias knew that, and to his quiet relief, so did Nathaniel. He didn't ask for forgiveness on the roof, and he didn't ask for it in the weeks that followed either. Instead, he did something Elias found far more convincing. He showed up, consistently, in small unglamorous ways. He started leaving Elias's coffee order, black, oat milk, 1 sugar, waiting at his desk on the mornings he knew Elias had early client calls. He gave credit for Elias's ideas in meetings instead of folding them quietly into his own, the way he'd noticed Elias's last manager used to. He stopped disappearing when conversations got difficult, even when Elias was still cautious, even when Elias tested that new steadiness with silences of his own. You don't have to keep proving it every day, Elias told him one evening, half exasperated, half something softer, after finding a second coffee waiting at his desk for the 5th morning in a row. I think I do, actually, Nathaniel said. Not to convince you. To remind myself that showing up is a choice I get to make now, not a risk I have to calculate. It was a small thing to say, but Elias felt it land somewhere important, and that night, for the first time since he'd found the old voice notes, he didn't feel the need to listen to them to remember what had drawn him to this man in the first place. He was watching it happen in real time. The trouble, when it came from the same place it always had. Nathaniel's father called on a Sunday. Elias only knew because Nathaniel's face changed the second his phone lit up, the easy warmth in it replaced by something braced and small. He stepped out of the coffee shop to take it. He came back 15 minutes later, quiet in a way Elias recognized as dangerous. He wants me at a family dinner next month, Nathaniel said, sitting back down like his legs had gotten heavier. There's a woman he wants me to meet. A business associate's daughter. He's decided this is the year I settle down properly. And what did you tell him? I told him I'd think about it. Nathaniel's hands were wrapped tight around his cup. Which is a coward's answer, and I know it. Elias reached across the small table, not quite touching him, close enough that Nathaniel could close the distance if he wanted to. You don't owe him a performance, he said carefully. But I'm not going to pretend I don't understand why walking away from that kind of leverage is hard. Your mother's care is real. His money is real. I'm not going to sit here and tell you the right answer is easy. I know what the right answer is, Nathaniel said, quietly furious, not at Elias. Elias understood, but at the whole architecture of a life built around one man's approval. I've known it since I was 17. Knowing it and being able to survive it are different things. Elias didn't offer easy comfort, because he'd learned by now that Nathaniel didn't want it and wouldn't believe it anyway. Instead he said the only thing he actually meant, whatever you decide, I'm not going anywhere just because it gets complicated. I already told you that once. I'm telling you again so it sticks this time. Nathaniel looked at him for a long moment, something fragile and grateful moving across his face. That might be the first time in my life someone said that and meant it. Then I'll keep saying it, Elias said, until you believe it without having to test it. But knowing the right answer and choosing it under pressure were, as Nathaniel had said, different things, and 3 weeks later, under the specific pressure of watching his mother's newest hospital bill land in his inbox, Nathaniel made a choice that fractured everything they'd carefully rebuilt. He agreed to the dinner. He agreed, without telling Elias first, to keep an open mind about the woman his father wanted him to meet, not because he wanted to, he explained later, desperately, but because for one weak evening the old fear had been louder than the new trust. Elias found out from a photo. Not because Nathaniel hid it, he told Elias himself, that same night, voice shaking, but the image had already circulated among mutual work contacts by the time he did, Nathaniel at a dinner table, smiling the careful, practiced smile Elias recognized as armor, sitting beside a woman he'd never mentioned. It meant nothing, Nathaniel said, showing up at Elias's door uninvited, breathless from more than just the stares. I sat through one dinner. I told her the truth before dessert. I told my father I'm done pretending, that this was the last performance he'll ever get out of me. You told me you were done disappearing when things got hard, Elias said, arms crossed, voice quieter than his anger deserved to be. And the first time your father raised his voice, you disappeared right back into being whoever he needed you to be. You didn't even call me first. I know, Nathaniel said. I know, and I don't have an excuse that makes it okay. I panicked. I let 17 years of fear override 3 months of finally getting this right. He stepped closer, stopping himself at the edge of the doorway, as if he understood, finally, that some distances have to be respected rather than crossed. I'm not asking you to forgive it tonight. I'm asking you to believe that I see it now, the pattern, the cowardice, all of it, and I don't want to be that person anymore. Elias's throat was tight. Wanting isn't the same as doing, Nathaniel. You taught me that yourself, without meaning to. He closed the door, gently, and stood on the other side of it for a long time before he let himself cry. Nathaniel did not disappear this time. That, Elias noticed, in the days that followed, cold, careful, professional days at the office, where they spoke only when work required it. He didn't vanish, didn't go silent, didn't leave Elias to wonder. He simply waited, visibly and uncomfortably, in the space he created, without demanding Elias fill it before he was ready. It was Priya, oblivious as ever to the personal weather around her, who handed them their final chance. The Halden campaign had been chosen for the agency showcase, presented live in front of the whole company, both their names on the credits. They rehearsed separately. They presented together, professional and precise, and if anyone noticed the current running beneath their careful coordination, no one said so. Afterward, in the empty conference room, Nathaniel spoke first. I told my father everything, 2 days after the dinner. Not the version I've told him pieces of my whole life, everything. That I'm done editing myself into someone he can be comfortable with. That if the cost of his money is my honesty, I don't want it. He exhaled, like the words had been sitting in his chest for years, waiting. He hasn't spoken to me since. I found a way to cover my mother's costs without him. It's tighter, and it's harder, but it's mine, and for the first time it doesn't feel like it's being used against me. Elias sat very still. That's a big thing to do alone. I didn't want to do it to win you back, Nathaniel said quickly. I want to be clear about that. I did it because you were right, wanting to be different isn't the same as being different, and I was tired of being the man who only finds his courage after he's already lost something because of the lack of it. He looked up, something unguarded in his face that Elias hadn't seen since the night on the roof. But I'd be lying if I said some part of me didn't hope it might matter to you too. Elias thought about the voice notes he still hadn't deleted. About the man who used to describe his mother's garden at 2 a.m, who was afraid of becoming smaller, who had finally, painfully, chosen not to be. It matters, he said quietly. It doesn't erase the dinner. It doesn't erase the door I closed on you. But it matters. I'm not asking you to pretend it didn't happen, Nathaniel said. I'm asking if there's still room for me to earn it back. Slowly. However long it takes. Elias looked at him for a long moment, really looked, the way he had that first terrible morning in the glass-walled office, except this time there was no shock in it, only the quiet, deliberate choice of someone deciding what he actually wanted, rather than what fear told him to protect himself from. Start with dinner, he said finally, the ghost of a smile finding its way onto his face. Just us this time. No fathers. No cameras. No disappearing. Nathaniel's answering smile was the most honest thing Elias had ever seen on his face. I can do that, he said. I can do that for as long as you'll let me. Months later, on a night with rain streaking the windows of an apartment they'd started, quietly and without ceremony, to call theirs, Elias found the old voice notes again while cleaning out his phone. He almost deleted them out of habit. He didn't. You kept those? Nathaniel asked, glancing over from the couch, not quite hiding his surprise. I kept them because they were true, Elias said. Even the parts that came before you were brave enough to believe them yourself. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. He rejected me online, he said slowly, testing the shape of the old wound out loud, the way you press on a bruise to check if it still hurts. That's how you tell it, isn't it? If someone asked. Elias considered that, and shook his head. No, he said. I'd tell it differently now. He didn't reject me. He was scared, and he ran, and then one day he stopped running, toward me, not away, and that's the part of the story that actually matters. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady and unbothered, on a city that had no idea two men in a small apartment had just finished rewriting the ending of a story that once looked, for a while, like it might never get one at all.